Oh, and then this is why the early church at every turn. Let me slow down and say this. If you do an intense Bible study with a lot of Sunday schools, churches, adult groups, whatever, and you really dig into the meat of the apostles as they write the epistles, there'll always be something that you got to kind of hem-haw around in the teaching and always kind of dance around, and that's the infatuation of the apostolic writers with suffering and persecution. They're always saying stuff like, I rejoice in persecutions. I count myself blessed to suffer with Christ. And they're all over the place in the New Testament. And you're always kind of having to dance around them with Bible studies. It's like, oh, you know, they were under a different system than we are. They were being persecuted. They had to learn how to find glory in the suffering. But that's not God's will for us. And it's incredible that we're so averse to bad things happening. We're so averse to it that we have created a culture, even within the church, that where if enough bad things are happening, it's one of two things. Either A, God is doing it to you to try to show you something, or B, you've sinned so much, you're out of God's protection. That's how we preach suffering in the American church. Let me say it again. Bad things happening? Well, God's trying to teach you a lesson. So He's brought this to you. Hopefully you get it. I mean, if you'll get it, it would stop. So humble yourself, pray, seek God, ask Him for whatever. Get the lesson, solve the lesson. God will take all this away. That attributes every bad thing to God. Cancer, tumors, rape, adultery. Oh yeah, well, God didn't make it happen, but God's working through it, making it. I've stood over enough caskets of little kids to stop preaching that foolishness. Because if you want to cause somebody to walk out and tell God they're done with Him, then attribute every bad thing that happens in people's lives to a God that's teaching you a lesson you can't possibly understand. Because how in the world are you going to learn that lesson? Or the second one, you have sin in your life, you just won't admit it. If you would, a bunch of this stuff will go away. The early church didn't preach either of those things. Instead, they said, when the bad happens, Paul got so infatuated with the bad that he started to say things like, I'm excited about, I count it joy when I find myself falling into persecutions. In other words, it lets me know that the Christ in me, it gives me such an opportunity to glorify the Christ in me every time I get to go through some hell. Because when I go through hell, I get to look over and see Christ going through hell with me, and it excites me that He's right there beside me. And that's mind-blowing when I read the New Testament. I go, I'm not asking God for that kind of Christianity. But I know that the power of God and the presence of God and the glory of God flows in a place, not where I go looking for trouble, but where I go looking for Jesus in my trouble. Amen. That everything I walk into, I stop blaming God. You're trying to teach me something, I got to get unrepentant. Instead, I grab hold of the resurrected Christ's hand and I go, I'm not sure what we're going to learn through this, but this cancer, this tumor, this adultery, this rape, this murder, it's happening to you because you're in me, the hope of glory. If it's happening to me, it's happening to Jesus. And He walks through it with me. And that's why Paul said, in my flesh, I fill up what's lacking in the afflictions of Christ. Not that Christ wasn't afflicted on my behalf, but I get to participate in what Jesus went through there.